Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne Shuko, a co-founder and manager of allsauthors.com, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience. We welcome you to the second in our summer series with HFC, this time featuring Dr. Daniel Potts and his wife, Ellen Potts, who are authors of a pocket guide for Alzheimer's caregivers. Thank you for sharing some of your precious time with us this evening. I'd like to introduce one of the members of our management team who is with us tonight, and that's Vicki Tapia. If you could just say hello, Vicki. And I'd like to introduce Bonnie of HFC, who is helping to moderate the event.
Well, hello, everyone. And we also have Jean Lee with us.
Oh, Jean. Hi, Jean. I didn't see you. Thank you for showing up, Jean. Appreciate that.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah, we're thrilled. This event is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you prefer not to be seen, please turn off your camera. All participants are muted. If you have a question for Dr. Potts or Ellen, please write it in the chat window at the bottom of your screen. Our moderator will be checking the chat, and we may call on you to ask the question yourself if you'd like to. Otherwise, I will ask the question. All participants tonight will receive a digital copy of All's Authors' first anthology, Alzheimer's and Dementia Caregiving Stories. 58 authors share their inspiring personal experiences. Watch your inbox for that notification and download your free book. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Dr. Potts and Ellen Potts. Daniel C. Potts, MD, FAAN, is a neurologist, author, educator, and champion of those living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and their care partners. Selected by the American Academy of Neurology as the 2008 Donald M. Palatucci Advocate of the Year, he also has been designated an Architect of Change by Maria Shriver. In 2016, he was chosen by the University of Alabama Medical Alumni Association as a recipient of the Martha Myers Role Model Award, which honors physician alumni whose lives epitomize the ideal of service to their communities. Along with his wife, Ellen W. Potts, MBA, he authored a pocket guide for the Alzheimer's caregiver, which is recommended by the Alzheimer's Association, the American Academy of Neurology, and Maria Shriver. Inspired by his father's transformation from sawmiller to watercolor artist in the throes of dementia through person-centered care and the expressive arts, Dr. Potts seeks to make these therapies more widely available through his foundation, Cognitive Dynamics. Additionally, he is passionate about promoting self-preservation and dignity for all persons with cognitive impairment. He practices neurology at the Tuscaloosa VA Medical Center. So, Dr. Potts, please tell us about your experience as a dementia caregiver for your father.
Hello, everybody. We're so happy to be with you today. Greetings from Tuscaloosa. Ellen and I are very excited about the opportunity to talk to you about our book, and I hope that you would allow me to introduce Ellen to you. The way we do things is we all do things together, but we have to divide and conquer. So when I first met the All's Authors amazing team and heard about what All's Authors was doing, I happened to be available at the time and have done more work with All's Authors than Ellen has at this point. But believe you me, she is just as involved, if not more, in dementia advocacy than I am, and wears many other hats also. So let me introduce Ellen. Would you mind if I introduce you?
That's fine, yeah.
Ellen W. Potts, MBA, is my wife. We were married in 1989. We started dating in college, and we started out as best friends, and we still are, amazingly. Ellen has had several family members who have had various kinds of dementia, and including folks that she had to help care for as a child. So down through the years, Ellen has been very interested in caregiving and knows a lot about it, probably more than I did coming into my neurology career. Ellen is currently the executive director of Habitat for Humanity of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and has served as board chair for Caring Days, one of the amazing adult dementia daycare organizations that our country has, and one that has won an award for excellence from the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. Ellen is co-author of A Pocket Guide for Alzheimer's Caregivers and also is an architect of change designated by Maria Shriver as well. And so I have to tell you, it was really Ellen's idea to write this book, and she allowed me to her out to doing that. But it's very much a partnership, as all our caregiving experience, care partnership experience has been. And so, Marianne, if you don't mind, we could start and say a little bit about how the book came about.
Sure.
I will start and say that my father Lester had Alzheimer's disease, diagnosed about the age of 70. He was a rural Alabama sawmiller, utilitarian soul, child of the Great Depression, who was very much about work and duty and dependability, etc. He's the best man I've ever known. Lester got Alzheimer's disease, and I was the only child and also happened to be a neurologist. So I found myself in a very unique situation, one that I didn't learn about in med school or neurology residency, really, and that was how to be a care partner, a secondary care partner for my mother, the primary care partner. Fortunately, I had Ellen with me, who did know some about that, but the journey with Dad is what sort of got us off thinking about the book. Dad became a watercolor artist, having never painted before, while attending Caring Days Adult Daycare, and painted over 100 watercolors. Many were images of his early life. So he was reminiscing through the art. It had many, many benefits for him. We could talk about that for days, but one of the things that it taught me as a neurologist, I have to value the human being that's still inside the person who has Alzheimer's or dementia, because they still very much are there, and they can be accessed. The person can be accessed through creativity and art and nature and relationships and validation and all those other things that we know to do as care partners. So Ellen and I walked along beside Dad and beside my mother, as she had with many family members. And through that journey, we realized that although many resources were available, that are wonderful resources, for us, we felt that we had something to offer in getting together a new book. And it was Ellen's idea, but it came out of that fruitful learning experience with Dad and with her many family members. And so I will defer to Ellen to tell a little bit how the book got started, and if you don't mind doing that, Ellen.
Well, at the end of the journey with 8 family members, 5 of them were mine, 3 of my 4 grandparents, and then 2 childless great aunts that we took care of. These 5 family members of mine had either Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia. In Danny's case, his dad had Alzheimer's disease, and his grandmother on his mom's side and his grandfather on his father's side had vascular dementia. And so, but the last person in that journey was his father, and who passed away in 2007. And it was about that time when we started realizing that, number one, we kind of had this vast body of experience with all of these family members, who had very different courses of illness, very different challenges with each one of them. And then, we realized that we had basically made most of the mistakes that you could make as family members caring for loved ones who had, some kind of dementia, and that we really wanted people to be able to learn from the mistakes that we and our family members had made, and learn from the things that had worked. And really, there were so many things that we wish we had known, before we got into this journey, or at least during the journey, that we didn't know. And we really wanted that guide to be very practical, you're a caregiver, you don't have time to, sit and eat bonbons and read books, very much. It's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week job. And so there's very little time to read and for leisure time. And so I'll tell you that each of us sat down and I read the book yesterday. He read it day before yesterday. So you can read it
Not
in
for
a
the
day.
first time,
Not
by
for the
the
first
way.
time.
Not for
Yes,
the first time.
exactly.
Just as a review.
But just as a review. But we really wanted it to be just absolutely practical information that you can use, that if you're having a particular problem, if you're having problems with wandering or probably with sleeplessness or whatever those, whatever the case may be, that pretty much I'll say most of the issues, most of the most common issues, and then some of the ones that are a little more esoteric are covered in the book. And we could pretty much illustrate everything with a family story because, with 8 family members, we pretty much run the gamut. And so, it was a joy to be able to write it and to really be able to communicate with people around the country, the world, who are having challenges with their loved ones, who are discouraged, who, all of the things that you go through, as a. So we hope that our book is helpful to people. And now I guess we can take some questions.
Yeah, and Marianne, you have other
Marianne,
questions
yeah,
for
you
us?
have other things to
We'll
say.
give a little intro there. So
Yeah, I do have some questions for you. I mean, 8 family members with dementia is got to be some kind of a record. That's a lot of experience. Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, because one of the issues that many of our authors have wrestled with when they write their story, it's one thing to write the story, it's another thing to publish the story and tell the family secrets. And I just was wondering how you felt about that. Is it anything that had been discussed with your dad? I mean, did you feel that, was it a breach of his privacy? How was that for you?
that's a real good question. And we started writing the book after Dad had passed on.
And all of them had
And
passed
all
on,
of
yes.
them actually had passed on. And so mother, his primary caregiver, was very much in favor of the book being written and for us to share our knowledge that we gained. So we felt she was the main one that we needed to discuss that with. Ellen's family members were also on board for this. So, we felt almost a calling to do this. And we felt without divulging too much, personal information along the way, we tried for all of it to fit within a framework of hope, which would be the primary theme of the book. For care partners is hope that this can be done. This can be done as a partnership. The human being is still present for whom you are in this partnership. We want to help you reach that person. And so we wanted hope to be the emerging theme that, yes, did include some family information, but we feel confident that we did it in a dignified way so that it would be helpful for people.
And I'd just say that, all of our family members, and I would say especially his dad, but all of our family members really were people who lived lives of service, and they would have been honored that we took their experiences and helped other people with those. And his mother is an English teacher. My mother is an English teacher, and they helped proof the book. And so I really feel like that our relatives up, are in heaven looking down and are happy with this. That their experiences were able to help some people along their way, because they were those kinds of people. They lived lives of service to their community, and this is one more way that they can serve their community.
That's a beautiful way to put that. And I know it's a common sentiment amongst the authors management team that our loved ones are all together up in heaven, cheering us on, giving us the strength to continue building what we've built, because it's a really good thing and a powerful thing to share these stories. We encourage everybody to share their story, even if you just tell somebody,
Yes.
tell
Yes.
someone maybe
So
who doesn't
important.
know, and
It's
find
so
support
important.
that way. Dr. Potts, as a physician, no less a neurologist whose daily work includes patients who have dementia, people who are undergoing workup and their families. Did you feel as though you were prepared to be involved in the care of a parent with dementia?
Absolutely not, Mary Ann. So not to knock the training that I had. I feel like it was excellent training. I'm thankful for my mentors, my patients that were involved in, that I was involved in caring for, and all the other colleagues that I had. But this is not something that is taught, or at least at that time, and probably still is not taught in med school and residency. The caregiving part, and I think it should be, but it's not as much. And so, no, I felt terribly unprepared. Um, I felt like I knew a good bit about the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, about how you work up dementia, about the other, the other conditions you need to rule out, and that sort of thing. But the day-to-day care management, I had no idea how to do, and so I felt very inadequate to advise my mother about things that popped up. As a matter of fact, the way the book is structured, the second half of the book is sort of a very much 1 or 2 page, what are some guidelines to do when this happens, when this arises? Well, that was our lives at the time. Mother would ask us how to do something. What should I do when this happens? How should I approach him when this happens? And I couldn't tell her. And so that's why we structured the book, that we need a quick guide so that somebody can have a reference and they can read more elsewhere or even in the front. But so to answer your question, no, I felt unprepared until after Dad had passed on. So the things that we know now, I had no idea about before we wrote the book.
And that's like most of us, I think, who have been caregivers or are caregivers. There's no crash course. You just jump into it, and it's putting out fires every day.
And if I
And
may
that's
say
why we
this
have
too,
ALS authors to help caregivers find resources that are quality resources to help them on their journey. So it's good to hear that even a physician didn't have all the answers, because I know people, they beat themselves up because they struggle and they don't know what to do, but not everybody knows what to do. And all of our situations are different.
yes, yes. Well, one of the things that showed me was that I need to be sort of an evangelist of sorts for organizations like All Authors amongst physicians, because when I was coming along, I didn't even know where to look for the right kind of information. I mean, I knew the organizations, the wonderful organizations like AFA, Us Against Alzheimer's, Dementia Action Alliance, Alzheimer's Association, and all of that. I knew about those organizations, but I didn't know much about them, and I didn't know the resources. And so it's very important that we get the word out to other providers, for physicians and other providers, about where to look and where this information is.
And I would just say, just to kind of tag along on what you were talking about, I think that the most important skill that you can develop as a care partner is the ability to forgive yourself, because you will never meet your own standards. You will always, because you are not spending enough time with your loved one, or maybe you're spending too much time with your loved one and not enough with your other family members, or you're, too much this, too much that, not enough this. You cannot be Wonder Woman, and you cannot be Superman. And I would guarantee you can turn off your camera, rip open your bodice or your shirt, and there's not going to be a big S or a W on it. And so, just realize that you can do the best you can do. And you know, and you can't compare yourself to someone else. You can't say, gosh, you know, Susie kept her husband at home for 10 years. Why only after a year am I, you know, I'm floundering, I can't do this. Whatever the case may be, there, you know, if you've seen one case of Alzheimer's disease or any kind of dementia, really, you've seen one case. Every family member we had, whether it was Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia, every family member we had was different. They had different challenges, they had different problems. And so I would just say, forgive yourself, do the best you can. Wake up the next day and say, you know what, I'm going to do the best I can today. And every time you fail to meet your own unrealistic expectations, tell yourself, I mean, look yourself in the mirror and say, I forgive you. You know, I forgive you. I'm going to try. I'm going to continue to do the best I can for my loved one. And that is a beautiful, selfless act of love that, you know, nobody needs to be able to throw rocks at you, because that it's just a beautiful, selfless act of love. And know that you cannot be perfect, and don't expect that of yourself. So learn to forgive yourself. It's the best life skill, really the best life skill in general, but especially for those people who are caring for loved ones.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. That's really helpful advice, because I know a lot of people struggle.
Oh,
Yeah.
everyone. I
Yeah.
think everyone
Yes.
struggles, because
Everyone
you know,
struggles.
yeah, guilt is the ever-present monster of caregiving. I mean,
Yes.
it really is.
And denial.
Yeah, guilt and denial. Exactly.
And grief.
And grief.
Yeah,
Yes.
and grief.
Yes.
Can we
Yes.
talk a little bit about grief? How did you handle your grief
Sure.
throughout this time?
Well,
Not well. Ellen answered. You know, grief. I mean, good night. I mean, I got to plug on here. That's what I told myself. So what I did was I plugged on. I plunged into, you know, my work, you know, tenfold. I took no care of myself. Okay. I, you know, hid my weakness, my emotions. I buried them into my work and some other unhealthy habits. And so I handled it poorly. And I also handled anger poorly, because I was angry about this. I mean, here I was, a neurologist supposed to be an expert in this. You know, nobody wanted to provide care to my dad more than I did. I mean, I wanted it to be excellent in every way. And it wasn't, to me, excellent in every way. And so okay, damn it. What I'll do is I'll just double over and do everything else better than I possibly could. And so that didn't work out very well, as you might imagine. So what I did is I crashed after Dad passed away, you know. And so you know, so then I learned how to take care of myself. And interestingly, you know, the whole journey with dementia for me has been about personhood, selfhood. That's been the journey. That's the theme of the journey. Finding personhood in person living with dementia and holding on to the personhood you have as a care partner. Well, guess what? I was losing myself, my own personhood. I was not finding my own personhood, because, as we all know who've read Tom Kitwood's work and who've done any dementia work at all, the milieu with which you are surrounded contributes to your personhood, to your selfhood. So we want to you know, surround people living with dementia with the kind of care the kind of care milieu that builds up their personhood. But I wasn't doing that for myself. I was not surrounding myself. I mean, here was my supportive family. They were still supportive. Here were my colleagues, but I wouldn't see that, and I couldn't hear that, because I had not dealt with my grief, my anger, my sorrow. And so, to answer your question, I dealt with it poorly. However, I learned how to deal with it, and eventually did deal with it. But it almost destroyed me, my family, my practice, etc. Okay. I mean, you may not have wanted all that, but that's what I gave you. That's because that's the truth. Ellen, I don't know if you have comments.
I would say that, this is, golly, I read the book yesterday and I thought, golly, did I say this too many times? Did we say it's a marathon and not a sprint? I mean, you really do have to take care of yourself, because it's like, running your car, never putting gas in the gas tank, never changing the oil, never rotating and balancing the tires. And then all of a sudden you're surprised when it doesn't run anymore. That you really do have to take care of yourself and be creative in finding ways to do that. I'll tell you, when you live in a relatively decent sized metropolitan area, a lot of times there are resources and things available. But for many of rural caregivers, and my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother's dad was the first in my five people in my family to start this. And he started Alzheimer's disease, started showing signs when I was about 4 years old in 1970. So if you like to do math and figure out how old I am. But, it really, he was difficult to deal with. Nobody knew how to deal with Alzheimer's disease. They called it hardening the arteries. There was not really no one, especially in rural northeastern Tennessee in the mountains, no one diagnosed him with Alzheimer's. We ended up in about 1974 taking him to Emory in Atlanta and having him diagnosed. But in the rural areas, there is such a lack of any kind of supportive resources. And I would just say that whether you're rural or urban or suburban or whatever, the online resources are amazing now. There wasn't such a thing when my grandfather was going through this, but I know, Josie, the Alzheimer's Foundation has a hotline, social workers people you can call. There are all kinds of wonderful online resources that, people that you can, Facebook groups that you can just type in how frustrated you are because of XYZ thing that your loved one is doing, or where you more common XYZ thing that your family member who is not caring for your loved one, but is criticizing your own care of your loved one is doing. All of those things. And, that's, I would say, do your best to find some kind of respite care. When family members ask, or loved ones, or friends, whoever, when they ask, oh, I'd love to help. Great. Would you go to the grocery store for me? Here's my credit card, or lovely. You can stay with, granddaddy while I go and get a pedicure or whatever, whatever it is. But really give family members and friends a list. A friend of my mother's her husband had Alzheimer's disease, and there were about 5 men from the church that every Wednesday they would come get him about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and they would go do things for the whole day. And, and his wife had a whole day of respite, and these were 5 retired guys. And, and some of them would be out of town, but 2 or 3 of them would always know that this was their Wednesday gig, and they were able to help her. I know there are a lot of churches and synagogues and other, faith based organizations that are starting respite centers that are volunteer based. Dementia daycare, golly, it's a fabulous option. And then, there are other options that may or may not be available in your area. Sometimes assisted living or nursing homes, hospice agencies. Sometimes you can check your loved one in for, a week or something while you go and take a vacation, you get some respite. But I would just encourage you to find creative ways to care for yourself, because you don't want to contribute to the statistics, where the caregiver dies of literally often of exhaustion, and not taking care of himself or herself, not taking care of your own health, not going to the doctor, not going to the dentist, not taking care of yourself. I would just encourage everyone to the extent you can to do that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm looking at that painting on the wall behind you. Is that one of your dad's?
It's actually a daughter.
That's a daughter. That's our older
Oh.
daughter. Yeah. So before Papa got, well, he probably had Alzheimer's disease and we didn't know it. We all took a trip to Scotland. And so our daughter loved the Dunvegan. Is that the Dunvegan?
Dunvegan
Castle? Yeah, the Dunvegan
Yeah,
Castle.
That's Dunvegan.
So
when
she
was
painted
about
that
12.
later.
Uh-huh.
All right. Tell us a little more about your father and his artwork and how he became, found his artist soul at the dementia daycare. That must have been astounding.
Oh, it was.
Right.
Yeah, it was. So, well, first of all, we knew Dad would not go to. We didn't feel like he'd go to Caring Days, first of all. So he finally went. That was a great day. And then he met all these folks that just loved him like he was. They weren't looking for loss. They were looking for something to love. And the Lester that came through the door every day was the one they loved. And so he had that sort of environment there. But then he met a retired artist named George Parker. George started the art program at Caring Days. He was not an art therapist. However, he had an innate understanding about how to share his gift, and actually had an amazing story of his own. He had been in a cardiac arrest, found himself on the ventilator in a coma, was unconscious for a long, long time, was not thought to survive, was not thought he was going to survive. And as soon as he woke up and began to communicate and got extubated, he told people, "I'm George Parker, and I've been saved so I can share my art with people living with dementia."
Oh, God.
That's a specific, specific message from the Lord.
Specific message.
Whoa,
So George got rehabbed up and came to Caring Days and
Mhm.
volunteered. And so, and Lester was one of his first people who participated. Mother said, "He's not going to do that, but you can let him try." Well, sure enough, he did do that. And George helped him to understand talent that he'd never expressed. And of course, at the time, Dad was having trouble with language, aphasia, one of the 4 A's of Alzheimer's, by the way. So aphasia, he couldn't get his words out very well, and he was having a lot of emotional trouble at the time because he's always been a capable man who could do anything he wanted to, and now he couldn't do things, so he couldn't express those emotions. And the art gave him a channel through which to express the emotions and through which to tell his story non-verbally, which he did. And so he brought home a little hummingbird to start with. That was his first painting on a little 9x14 canvas, a little watercolor, beautiful piece. And Mother said, "Honey, where'd you get that? That's so pretty." He said, "I did that myself." She said, "Oh, did you trace it? Did Mr. Parker do that for you, honey? Let's write him a thank you note." "I did it myself," he said. He was so proud of his hummingbird. That was the first of over 100 that he did. And Dad painted things like wood rings, wood rings. He painted wood rings in ducks and things like that because he'd been looking at these logs all his life. He painted his father's high top shoes and hat. He painted a cross coming out of a boot. He painted cross-cut saws. He painted a rainbow-colored smokehouse. All of these are images from his childhood, and I would argue from his personhood, from his selfhood, and from home. So you see, Dad was painting home. Dad was painting himself at a time when his face was not expressing itself very well, nor was his language. He was painting Lester for us on the canvas. And so that, of course, was an amazingly empowering and inspirational situation. And so there's one painting called the Blue Collage that Dad painted in late stage Alzheimer's when he couldn't really talk much anymore, and it has all of these images in it, including an abstract image of his dad. And I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe he had done it. And so that painting, more than any other thing that came out of Dad's illness, showed me the human being is still there. They're living with all these loves that they've had, all these familiar objects and people and relationship. It's in there in long-term memory, and I would say knitted up together with the soul. And it comes out in expressive arts, music, art, dance, movement, poetry, any kind of creativity. It comes out in many cases. And so that's what we saw with Lester.
And literally this man, he never went fishing unless it was to put food on the table. He was the most utilitarian soul who ever walked the earth. He really was. And as his, we all have in our frontal and temporal lobes, I'm Lester Potts. I work hard. I don't paint unless it's like to paint a wall or a fence, and nothing esoteric. Or aesthetic really about him. And he fell in love with the art because the artistic part of his brain was very little affected until the late stages of Alzheimer's disease. And interestingly enough, so Danny and I met because, well, we went to college together, but we met in the college choir. His mother is, a church choir director. So lots of musicians. Lester was not. He could not carry a tune in a bucket. But once he got Alzheimer's disease, lo and behold, he could sing in tune. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
My mother heard my dad sing for the first time on key for the first time in almost 50 years when he was in hospice with just a few days to live.
And I'll just say, and I wish we had, his daddy was the 8th of these 8 family members. And we did not know this. I wish we had. But, when his dad was in hospice of West Alabama in the last 4 or 5 days of his life, he had not really spoken except maybe 1 or 2 words at a time in about 6 months. And so we, being singers and having lots of singers who are friends, we would sing around his bed and sing the hymns of his childhood loved, and Old Rugged Cross and all of these others. And lo and behold, if that man didn't start singing with us, and if you took an extra long breath, he would go on without you. And funny but true story. I was singing. It was less than 24 hours before he passed away, and I was feeding him some ice cream, and Danny and his mother actually were out meeting with the funeral director. And so I was trying to sing How Great Thou Art and feed him ice cream at the same time. And my brain got overwhelmed and, too many things going on at once. And I forgot the words in the middle. And I said, "Oh, Papa, I forgot the words to How Great Thou Art." And this man whose face, really his expression had not changed in months, he went, and
How
so,
could anybody?
yeah, it was funny, but he sang along. And so, if your loved one was religious in their youth, sing the songs of their youth that they would have sung. If they were not religious, the reason religious music particularly connects is because there's safety, there's emotion, there's, all of these different parts of the brain that are connecting in religious music. But then also, what did they dance to when they were a teenager and in their 20s? With me, if I hear In the Name of Love by U2, I'm going back to my, being an 18-year-old dancing in the basement of the fraternity house, but play those things that would have brought them joy at that time in their life. And I bet if you find the right one, they'll be singing along too. But I know one lady was talking. She couldn't find. She was actually a paid caregiver, a sitter in someone's home, and she could not find a way to connect with this gentleman. Nothing worked. But he was a chemistry professor, and so she brought out the periodic table of elements. And all of a sudden, this man who had not really communicated much went, oh, and he just started expounding on chemistry. There are things that, we had a lady that participated in the class that Danny taught, that she had stopped really participating. She stopped really communicating. Well, the students came to visit her. There were students from the University of Alabama who partnered with people to tell life story. But one of her daughters brought out her wedding dress, and she started looking at her wedding dress, and she said, oh, And she started talking about all of the things associated with the wedding. So how much she loved her husband. She started talking about the black sheep cousin that they were hoping wouldn't show up, but actually did. And all of the things that, the wedding dress that was, she ate too much and it was a little tight, or, whatever the stories were. But, look at those. If you want to connect with your loved one, think about those familiar objects even that have a lot of emotion tied into them. I told that story about the wedding dress one time, and a lady raised her hand and she said, my daddy was a huge University of Alabama football fan, and he had a 1961 football that was signed by the entire team and Coach Bear Bryant. And she said, all I had to do was bring out that football and he could start talking about the plays, and the blocks and the receptions and the runs and touchdowns and all of those things that were associated, with some of those games in that 1961 season. And, these are people in mid stages, late, not late stage, although music certainly and art can connect with people, even in the latest stages. Like I said, with Danny's dad,
It
just
unlocks the
couple of days before he
autobiographical.
died.
It unlocks the autobiographical memory. So, the autobiographical memory, which is a string of memories, of course, that you and I all have, that makes up the story of our lives. It's mostly housed in the right temporal lobe, but in other areas too. But of course, artistic expression, even artistic viewing, has a right hemispheric predominance. And it's thought that these expressive arts can tap into that autobiographical memory and help it to get out. In fact, to help rewrite the story. So this is one of the reasons they work. But I didn't know much of that then. So that's sort of the story of the art.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I see a question. How long did it take us to write this? We had been writing some blogs and things, and we took a lot of the blogs because they were a lot of what, the meat of the book. And so it really didn't take that long to write it, partly because we've been kind of writing along, for Maria Shriver, and then also for some local newspapers and things too.
Marianne, I'm seeing some questions. Do you want us to respond to some of the questions now, or do you?
No, that's fine. That was next thing on my list. There's a question from Jean Lee. How do you keep your own experience with your dad into your neurology practice, as you have to deliver a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's to an individual or family?
Well, it's a great question. And the main way I incorporate it is not overtly, but it colors everything I do in the practice of medicine now. And what I mean by that is that it has, first of all, emphasized personhood and caused me to emphasize that. And how does that translate into my practice? Well, it translates in many ways. Number one is I speak to the person living with dementia primarily in the office visit, not the care partner. Now, I also speak to the care partners, but I start with acknowledging Mr. Jones just like he's always been, and he's the patient. So I talk to him first. And then I tell him that I'm also going to ask his loved one, if it's okay with him, how things are going. And we do that. But the first way is I acknowledge, and I do that because of Dad. I also, when I deliver a diagnosis, I try to be more compassionate about it, and I try to spend more time with it than I did before. And I try to leave room for questions. I try to give resources. I try to create an atmosphere of hope, not of hiding in the shadows with this. And because I've heard too many people living with dementia say that the day they were diagnosed was the worst day of their lives, not necessarily because the diagnosis was so bad, it is, but because of the way it was delivered by my colleagues. And so, I mean, we got to do a better job of that. So it has really made me more compassionate and empathetic. My journey with Dad has. And then I tell some people about Dad when I'm talking about the expressive arts, and I'm talking about how important they were. I mentioned Dad to folks. And so I use that as an educational piece as well.
Could you tell us a little bit about cognitive dynamics?
Absolutely. So cognitive dynamics is a foundation that our family formed after Dad had passed on, because we realized that we had some things to offer that we needed to give back. And the story of Dad's art, we wanted to use that art to inspire people and also to create other opportunities. So about shortly after about the same time we were writing the book, we were also getting documents ready to create a 501c3 foundation, which we did. And the first event we had was an art show of Dad's art in Beverly Hills at the David Streets galleries. The way that came about is that I had, Mary Ann mentioned earlier, an advocacy training program that the American Academy of Neurology offers. Well, I was selected to be in that program to train how to be an advocate. I mean, I knew we wanted to do something, and I was so impassioned about it. Dad had just passed on, but I really didn't know how to do it. Well, this training program really taught me how to be an effective advocate, from working with the media to interacting with government officials, et cetera, to drafting an action plan. And so so creating a foundation was part of what was present in that action plan. So we had the art show in Beverly Hills. We were able to connect with Maria Shriver after that, start blogging for her. She was supportive of the book. Matter of fact, David Streets gave her a copy of the book. And then she contacted us about wanting to support our work, et cetera, in that regard. But that was sort of the launching of cognitive dynamics. After that, dynamics mainly has developed a program called Bringing Art to Life. Bringing Art to Life takes people who are like Lester, like my dad, like all of our other family members living with dementia, and partnerships with students, either high school students, college students, professional students, med students, and usually in residential settings such as a dementia daycare or an assisted living specialty care unit, et cetera. And under the direction of an art therapist, we have therapy together. And we also teach the students didactically about dementia, about how to interact with people who are living with dementia, the science behind it, caregiving issues, et cetera. And so those partnerships over the past 10 to 12 years have been really a teaching ground for us to see the amazing transformation that happens not only in people living with dementia and their care partners, but the students. So many of whom have gone into careers in this field because of that program. And so cognitive dynamics supports that program, and that's our main program.
That sounds amazing. How do people find out more about that, or can get involved in it?
We have a website, cognitive-dynamics.org. We also have a Facebook page. If you just search Facebook for Cognitive Dynamics Foundation, you'll find our Facebook page. And then finally, we have a Twitter feed and a YouTube channel, Cognitive Dynamics 1. And on that YouTube channel, we have educational videos, we have art, we have some documentary videos, we have music, we have mindful walks, we have photography. I do photography too. See, Dad inspired me to write poetry and make photos and do all this stuff. So I try to share that as well with people. It helps people, and it helps people look at nature photography. That's one of the things that I'm interested in, is exposing people living with dementia to those beautiful nature scenes, and it calms people. So that's kind of how you can get in touch with us.
Okay, I want to encourage everyone here tonight to follow you on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, because you post your photos and your dad's artwork and your poetry and writings there pretty much every day. And
That's right.
It's something nice to look forward to. So you definitely want to look him up on his social media. There is another question.
Can I say this too, Mary Ann? We can access Lester's art on lesterslegacy.com. We have Dad's art prints for sale there, and also note cards. And a portion of those proceeds go to support the foundation, Cognitive Dynamics, in our programming.
And I wanted to add one more thing, and actually Josie and Chuck at the Alzheimer's Foundation, hey Josie, kind of inspired this years ago, but we're finally now getting to do this. I have a different hat that I wear, and normally my hats aren't worn at the same time. I'm the executive director at Habitat for Humanity, but we are partnering with John Zeisel, who is very well known in the field of environmental design, and we're going to be able to build a habitat house for someone with dementia. And we're excited about that. And we're doing this in a way that is going to cost very little money, very little additional money in terms of, over and above what a normal habitat house would cost. And we're going to, we hope, present this at the Habitat International Convention this coming spring, so that these inexpensive techniques for redesigning your home for someone with Alzheimer's disease or some other kind of dementia, or designing a home if you're building it from scratch, things that you can do that where basically the house can help partner in the care for your loved one. And so we're really, really excited about that. And thank you, Josie and Chuck, for coming up with that fabulous idea.
And thank you also for all the comments that are in the chat. I'm sorry
we haven't. Yeah,
I'm not smart enough to be able to respond to those while we're doing this, but thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I hope our book is helpful for folks. We really do.
We do have one more question. Do you find it important for the patient to know their diagnosis of Alzheimer's?
Great question. I was sort of brought up to sort of take it on a case-by-case basis. For instance, if a person had 4 siblings to pass away from Alzheimer's disease, and their greatest fear in life was that they would get Alzheimer's disease, and they now have Alzheimer's disease, I don't think you can come in with a cookbook and say, oh yes, everyone needs to know this. Well, now I do believe that folks need to know, yes, and I teach that and I'm trained that way. But it has to be done very compassionately and with the input of the family, and with, ethically, and someone needs to really talk about this and do it. But my approach is that everyone needs to know they are living with dementia, that has dementia. I usually try to tell people exactly what type I think it is. And I try to do that in a compassionate way, because what needs to happen is it doesn't need to be buried. It doesn't need to be shut off. It doesn't need to be not talked about. It very much needs to be woven into this person's story. Just like if they have terrible diabetes or end-stage cardiomyopathy, that's not something we're going to bury off, cut off, and have a less than whole person sitting in front of us because they don't know their whole story. So we want to be able to weave that story into their current story. And it's not something to be ashamed of. You're not crazy. This can be something we're going to live with, and we can help you live well with it. So my view is that people need to know what's wrong with them. And so I try to compassionately tell them that.
And when we think about, especially the friends we have right now who are living well with dementia, Cynthia Hewling Hummel and
Brian LeBlanc
and others, and then people that we know who are trying to deny, that this is a problem, that it's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it's there, but nobody is willing to talk about it. It's so much healthier, and so much, the people who are living well with Alzheimer's are living well. I mean, they are joyful. I'm not going to say that it never, weighs them down. It doesn't worry them. It is, but they're living well. They're enjoying their lives. They are doing the best, the best every day. They're living their best life every day. And none of us know how much time we have. You could go, I could drop dead of a heart attack right now. So, we've all been diagnosed with a terminal illness called life. And so, whatever you have, live until you die. My mother is nearly 90, and she says, well, I'm just going to live until I die, and she's walking today. So, live your life, enjoy. If you get a diagnosis with, that's unpleasant, whether it's cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever it is, live your life,
Marianne, there's some things in the book that we would change now.
Mhm.
There's some wording, there's some words that we use that we will now, as you go along, I know more today than I did yesterday.
Right.
So we want to let, when we do our second edition, it'll be better.
Yeah.
And the third edition will be better than that. So
Yeah. What would be some of the words you would change?
Oh, well, the word afflicted would be removed from the book.
Okay.
in the book, it says basically don't ever, it doesn't say don't ever, but it says basically use dementia rather than Alzheimer's disease.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
So there's a
we
lot
don't
of
agree
things
with
that we
that.
put in,
Okay.
a lot of things that are in the book that we now don't agree with. We know better.
Not a
we've
lot.
had
Most
had
of
10
it is.
we've
yeah.
had 10
Yeah.
to 12 years of experience with this. I'm not saying that we would change the meat of the
Mhm.
book. I just
Mhm.
think there's a word here and a word there that we would change. But
Yeah.
the spirit of the book is there and it'll stay that way.
A couple of words that are commonly used when speaking of dementia that come to mind that they're controversial right now is suffer or suffering, people suffering,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because people
Right.
with dementia will tell you they're not suffering.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times. And no, I forgot what the second one was, but what do you think about not using that word?
Yeah, that's another one of the words. So
Yeah.
our thinking, we thought a lot about it and talked to a
Mhm.
lot of people about it. And although I know there were days when my dad was suffering, I have no doubt about that.
Mhm.
I can't know what his inner experience was at those times, and it is unfair for me to place his living in the framework of suffering or misery or affliction of some kind, because I'm not him, so I can't do that. So do you say so I can surmise that he's feeling a certain way, but I don't know that he is feeling a certain way, because I believe there are comforts, mysterious comforts that come to play in a human being who is going through something like that. And the great Elie Wiesel would say that kind of thing in terms of the terrible things that he and his family endured. But do you see? So I very much agree with what you're saying, that we have to be careful with those terminologies that are a judgment of sorts upon the experience of another human being.
Very good. Very good. So I want to thank everyone for attending this second session in our 2021 summer book series with HFC. And I hope you got a lot out of it. I know that I did. Please take a minute to browse our bookstore of more than 300 titles on Alzheimer's and dementia, and check out our podcast, where our authors, including Dan, tell their inspiring personal dementia stories. You will receive a follow-up email from all authors and will be added to our newsletter mailing list. Each week, we announce a new author and resource who's on the podcast, coming events, and other useful info for caregivers and professionals. And you may unsubscribe at any time if you decide it's not for you. So once again, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I wish you all well on your dementia journeys. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
We
Thanks for
appreciate
all the
of you.
comments.
Thank you
We
for the
appreciate
lovely
it.
comments.